Hello, and welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. Each episode, we talk about a particular topic in the life of a professor. We are tenure-track faculty members in the sciences, working at a primarily undergraduate university in California. The purpose of our podcast is reflection, so we bring something we think is working and something we're working on to discuss.
Hi, welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. I'm Ruth.
And I'm Claire. And today we're going to talk about student evaluations. But first, Ruth, how is your week?
Well, my week was, there's two things I was going to say. One is, as you know, Claire, I have relatively short hair. And my hair is getting really interesting. I know this is not remotely important, but I do keep, even every Zoom interaction I'm having, I keep getting distracted by my own hair. And I wish there was a way to get yourself off the screen in Zoom. So yeah, things are going to get interesting.
Feature. Yeah.
Yes, I'm in a very transitional period with my hair, so that's interesting. And I think the other thing that really came up for me last week was the kids were really. We had quite a few meltdowns last week from everybody, and one thing, because my eldest daughter was just like, "Why are you on your phone all the time?" And I was like, "I'm checking email," but while also checking terrible statistics about whatever. But anyway. And I kind of realized, I guess normally we work pretty hard to sort of have home time be home time. We do work at home, but after they go to bed. And so they haven't really come up against this, enmeshing of office, home.
Right.
Sometimes, even for some reason, every time my husband has a meeting, it's like a magnet. They just are drawn to the door where his meeting is and have screaming matches outside the door. I don't know how they know, but they do. And so it's just they haven't really had this you need to be quiet during certain periods of time, or it just hasn't been a thing. Home was just home, and now it's confusing. So
that is confusing. How to establish the boundaries of home versus work when they're both at home.
Right. And I think I'm noticing, and I'm hearing a lot of people saying, because you could work at any time at home, some people were kind of working, I was talking to someone who's sort of, I don't think he doesn't have kids at home, they're older, and he was saying he was working from 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. because you can, but it doesn't mean you should. And then he just kind of hit the wall and had to take 2 days off. And it's so weird, this weird blurring between are we working or are we at home?
Yeah.
Or are we doing the two things at the same time?
And that's, it's always an issue that you have access to email and everything at home all the time. But there's if you're going to a physical place for work that's different than your home, you have that at least transition of now I am going home. And so we lost a little more of that right now. That's interesting.
Totally. So how was your week?
My week was good. One thing that I wanted to bring up was I had my first... So I'm on the committee for a graduate student for the first time ever.
Whoa.
And it's this master's student in biology. So some context, neither of our departments have master's students, but some of the other departments on campus do. And this student is doing biological stuff, but there's some chemistry side, and it relates to what I study. So anyway, I'm on his committee. And today we had a committee meeting where he presented his research and we asked questions. And it was the first time I was on this side of the committee. And that was pretty fun.
Milestone.
Yeah, it was exciting.
That's cool. Were you so mean?
I was kind of nervous, but then it turned out there was nothing to be nervous about. But yeah, I was kind of wondering, how do I, in my, what's it called? I guess a committee meeting in grad school, I remember it being super scary that they were going to ask all these tough questions. And I was like, should I be giving him tough questions? Or, what's my persona in this situation? Right. So that was kind of interesting to think about.
Yeah, so you didn't go with Snape then?
I didn't go with Snape, no.
That's what I'm always aspiring to. But and so do you have our quote for us this week?
Oh, I do. Yes. So this quote is from my all-time favorite author. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, her name is Diana Wynne Jones.
Okay, sorry, I was going to make a Harry Potter joke, but yes. Okay, keep going.
J.K. Rowling. Well, she's up there, but Diana Wynne Jones writes a lot of fantasy books, and I just think they're primo. So anyway, this is a quote from one of her books, which, by the way, I've been meaning to say, maybe we should have a discussion about what qualifies as a professor quote, because I feel like she qualifies, but it's kind of wishy-washy.
I've been pushing the limits too, so I think we should just run with it. So yeah.
Cool. Okay, so this is a quote from one of her books, and it is, "One person ought to treat another person properly, even if the person's himself." And, I mean, that's true all the time, of course. I thought it might especially be true when reading your student evaluations.
So just for like a bit of context for people, I'm very sweary, and I have been really reining it in, and sometimes we've been reining it in mechanically by
after the fact.
Yeah. So this episode is going to be really challenging for me to not be sweary, because it's so bad. It's so bad. Yes, but anyway, okay, student evaluations is what we're talking about.
Yes. So what do you want to start? What's working for you with student evaluations?
So I actually have a couple of ones.
Oh, good.
I do like overall want to acknowledge just the trauma of student evaluations and how horrible they are. And there's some things about our situation that makes it particularly awful, but I'm going to come to that later.
Okay, that'll be good. We can look forward to that.
One thing that we have at our university is we have a Centre for Teaching and Learning. And they offer a service called the mid-semester evaluation. And they have these students who I think are graduate students who are trained to go into a classroom, and they have these like, I don't know what happens because I'm not there, but they've explained it to me. So they kind of do these like group discussions, and they have this, like everyone gets into groups. They all fill out individual forms, and then they get into groups, and then they discuss things, and the person writes all the stuff on the board, and there's kind of things that there's consensus on and things that there isn't consensus on, and all these things are summarized in a document, and you get this meeting to go over them with you. And this was something I did not want to do, because I kind of thought, oh man, they're going to have all these complaints, and then I'm going to have to do everything they say. And then so I didn't.
Totally.
It was good. So actually, it was amazing the first time I did it, because certain things came up, and then I was able to address them and say, oh, I know you guys want me to give you homework solutions, and the reason I don't do that is this. But if you want to like ever bring a homework to me, we can go through the whole thing together, and I'll give you a lot of feedback on the exam, so you don't need to have all of this kind of stuff. And then I noticed like when I did that, that stuff didn't come on the final, it didn't show up on the final evaluation. And because I think there were some things that had been addressed. And then I've also had things where like, so I think I told you about these lab videos that I had them do for a while.
How did they work?
They were like, instead of doing a lab report, they made a little video of themselves. And some of them were genius and hilarious, but it was weird because one class loved it, and then the next class were just like, I hate this. And so, but it was interesting because the mid-semester evaluator person told me that like a whole group of students were like stood up and were like, everyone hates the lab videos. The lab videos are the worst, blah, blah, blah. And it was only like 4 people. And then everyone else was like, I actually really like them.
Interesting.
And suddenly there was this whole discussion, and these people had it in their head, like, I'm speaking for everyone, and everyone has this.
Yes.
And then they kind of got like, I mean, getting shouted down is maybe not what I'm shooting for, but there was like perspective, like, oh no, actually some people do like this, and you're not the only learner in the universe, and some people have other things, you know. And so it can really bring out some of these things.
That's great.
So that was really, really helpful. And it's just, I've really noticed that anytime I've done them, my evaluations are higher, and there's less of those initial complaints don't come up again because they've kind of been addressed. And so like, you know, like one thing with I'm using this, like I don't give them solution sets to the exams because I write really detailed information on the grading. And then we redo the exams in class and all this stuff. But something I think they might have interpreted it as like, she's so lazy, she doesn't, you know, but then they're like, oh, okay. And maybe they do think I'm lazy, but they still see there's some deliberation behind it.
Yeah, so you're kind of letting them behind the curtain so they get to see the reasons in your mind. That's wonderful that they heard that someone else in the class actually really liked the thing they hate, because that's so obvious so often on evaluations that some people love the thing that other people hate, and, well, okay.
Totally. And I think, like, I've spoken to someone else before who had, like, just this, you know, the group who were just, like, you know, complaining all the time. And then they did this mid-semester evaluation process. And I think then it became clear to that group that they weren't speaking for everyone.
Ah, yes.
And then it kind of changed the dynamic of the class in some way. And so, yeah, so it was awesome. So I don't know, I'm saying this and I recognize that this is probably not something that's offered everywhere. But I think there is other things people could do in terms of giving a survey midway through or whatever. And I think if you can address some of those things,
that's
it can help. And then I have another thing that actually has worked. So one thing I've heard from students is like they genuinely don't realize the evaluations matter. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, like you get people who just hate you with a fiery passion, or you get people who really feel strongly that you're great. Mm-hmm. So I've like started saying to the students, like, if you have completely medium neutral feelings about me, like, please fill in the evaluation. And you can write, like, I have no feelings about this professor whatsoever, but please put those in because, and then, like, I don't know, I haven't got anything to base this on, but it feels like that increases some participation. Like, just really highlighting how important it is. And even if you don't think you have anything to say, that's important because you want those medium people in there. So what's working for you?
Yeah, well, first, just a couple thoughts about that. I often tell my students, I haven't thought to say if you're middle of the road, I still want you. I like that. I normally tell them that this is how the university, one of the factors that they use to decide whether to keep hiring me to try to give that importance, and then that I value them. And then I also try to say that I need high response rates or else it's kind of meaningless, which... So anyway, I'm going to add that in, the middle of the road thing. I love that.
But it's true, right? Because if you get just these polarized viewpoints,
totally,
it ends up being totally, meaningless.
Yeah. Oh, and one thing that I have done that's not as formal as your mid-semester evaluations, but maybe is doable for people who don't have mid-semester evaluations, is I've handed out note cards midway through the semester, and I've told them to write down 3 things they love about the class and 3 things they hate about the class, or something like that. Oh. And then, a lot of people are like, I can't think of anything, and that's fine. But the ones who are really feeling passionate about something they don't like can get it out, and then that gives me a chance to respond, like you're saying. And then I like to put the things that I love so that hopefully I don't get rid of something that lots of people love, or I can say, look, some of you loved it and some of you hated it, and also it makes it easier for me to read them.
Oh, yeah, dude. And I think it's important to sort of model that kind of reflection, right? Because it's so easy to get annoyed about things and just be indignant, you know what I mean? But like to also be like, okay, wait, but like, is there anything good about this situation, or whatever? True. But that's cool. I like that.
Yeah. So some things that I was thinking about that are working good. One is to get those rates of response up. I don't know if most universities do this now, but we have our evaluations online, which means that the students have to do it electronically at some point. And so what we have done in the past is swap. I'll go to your class, you'll go to my class, and we'll sit in the classroom, take some class time, and do the evaluations in class. And that seems to really raise my, percent of people who've responded things.
Because I guess we're not allowed to be there when they do it, in case we're like menacing them in some way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that also shows that I value it enough to take class time. So
that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I've found helpful is when I'm actually going through the evaluations, which is of course the hard part, which we'll get to. Looking for and pulling quotes that I can use in my RTP files. And that is kind of nice because you're looking for the positive ones, and then when you're in your RTP file, you've got all these nice things that I feel like it's nice to pull out the strong ones and put them in there,
Dude, I mean, because that's something, because for the tenure stuff.
Right.
And I've been kind of... like, I feel sick when I think about going back through them, but maybe I got to go back through them with a positive, like, yes, I'm looking for the little gems.
And if you're going through them intentionally looking for quotes, you could skip the what could the instructor improve section. Of course, you've already read the what can the instructor improve section, so I'm assuming you don't need to look at that again.
Yeah, it's embedded in my brain. It's so bad, but yeah. Oh, okay. Are we done with the positives?
Yeah, we're done with the positives.
Dude, I hate them so much.
I know.
And it's like, it's so messed up. It's so messed up. So some things I want to grumble about.
Okay, what are they?
So in our tenure files, the student comments get submitted. And that is not true everywhere.
Oh, really?
So where I used to work before, I know the student comments were read by the chair in the place I worked before and the dean. So like things could be addressed. Like if something was like, Ruth just reads magazines in class all day, like someone would deal with that. But the only thing that went in your file was the number.
Okay.
And then I guess you could choose to put quotes in. But I hate the fact that the quotes go in. I hate that so much because this is like so... I'm trying to restrain the swearing, but like it's so like it's this kind of thing where it's this like online culture and it's anonymous.
Yes.
And like from talking to people who used to work like going through the paper copies, first of all, if anything really offensive was on there, they would not get forwarded to the faculty.
Wow,
like they would like
really?
filter that out. And then they were like, when it was pen and paper, students would just write like, I like her or whatever. And now they write these essays.
Interesting.
That are so, and so like on the whole, I get really, they're not bad evaluations. The students are really polite and quite nice. But then there's the ones that are like a literal stake in your heart. And like, I feel like I just read them bright red and burning with shame.
Yeah.
And it's so terrible. It is so terrible.
It's so
terrible. And the thought of some of these crazy things that people write going through all of these other faculty hands and they're reading. So do you remember I have talked a little bit on this about the Dementor kids? So those Dementor kids.
The Dementor kids.
Yeah, dude, like they were like, go back to Ireland, like we don't, like you shouldn't be in this country. Like so mean.
Oh my gosh.
And they also, for some crazy reason, one of them wrote, she called us a bunch of bitcheses, which is definitely not true. I did not do that. But then I had to write in my tenure file,
Right.
P.S. I never used the words, like I never did that thing. And it was like, it made me so frustrated to have to officially address something that is not, like there's no repercussions.
Right.
And I understand, I can obviously see that student evaluations absolutely have to be anonymous for the professor, or else I would be like plotting my revenge in the future, and so that wouldn't be helpful. But I feel like there should be some potential, oh, the dean contacts you and like, I hear that Professor Ruth said that you were all a bunch of bitchs. Like, should we address that? Or there should be, like, I've heard of people getting racial abuse. I've heard of people getting like really gross sexual stuff said, and like I feel like there should be some, because they have to log in to do it, there should be some accountability for egregiousness, and that there should be the potential for some follow-up. But it feels bananas to me that in this official document we prefer, like there can be like, you have to hand in these PDFs of like potential swear words or like rude things, and I just, why do we have to include the comments in our tenure files? And you
pretty much have to, like you're saying, highlight them, in fact, because you have to address them.
Oh yeah, and like then, no, I never did do blah blah blah. And so if not some accountability, at least maybe the option of removing this particular comment. Like this one we have had, you have a discussion with your dean about how this never happened and it's just eliminated or something. Would that be good? Yeah, totally. And I think reading the comments is actually really important, because there can be stuff in there that is like, oh, I didn't realize that, or whatever. But the thing that I find really destructive about this whole process is there's no accountability on the part of the student.
Right.
So like they can just be having a really bad day and just vent.
Right. And they probably are. It's usually finals week. And
I know there needs to be a better time to do this. But also, like any faculty I've talked to about how do you deal with this? Like how do you deal with the horror show of reading student evaluations? Right. And they always say, oh, I just don't read them.
Really?
And it's like, that's what everyone is telling me. Just don't read them. There's nothing, like it's just a dangerous, damaging process. But because of where we are, we have to read them because otherwise you can't address crazy stuff like, you know,
and really
called us.
Aside from the crazy stuff, I do want to know if there was some general consensus.
Right, so I wish there was some way of making the process not terrible, you know. And again, like, I'm saying all this, and Eric, like, my husband is always like, how many evaluations did you get? And like, how many were nice?
Yeah.
And then there's just one, and I'm just like fester over it, you know what I mean? And so there's always
we have the same conversation over here.
I know, and there's like, and I would say the same thing to you, where I'm like, but you got like 27 glowing, but like, I would say that to you while I'm festering.
Right.
And like, I've gotten, like, some of them are so mean, like the Dementor kids. So I do a whole thing in class when I do a problem on the board, where I kind of do sort of call and response, sort of, but I'm like, yeah, and what will delta X be? And I want them to use their calculators and do stuff, and calculate stuff. And this person wrote, she is so stupid. She has to get us to solve the problems for her. She is incapable of doing intro electromagnetism. I was like, wow.
And so that's a perfect example of something where if that had been addressed at some mid-semester moment, then maybe that person would have realized that, that this is part of your teaching philosophy.
Right. But they were like, no, she's so dumb. And like, reading that, like, even saying that out loud, I'm going like red right now. But
totally.
Oh, man.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and where I worked before, I feel like there was a different, like, one person wrote once, like, I'm okay with women working outside the home. Like, thank you, first of all, that's really polite. But so they were okay with women working outside the home, but if you're going to have kids, like, you need to figure out you need to keep it together. Because basically my daughter got pneumonia and I had to cancel class. Mm-hmm. And I was I wanted to tell them that, so like, I wasn't just getting my nails done or something. Right. Like, it was a serious, and so this person really took umbrage at that and was like, this is really unprofessional.
Huh. How
that
strange.
You let this sick kid get in the way or whatever. So it was really bizarre.
Oh man.
Bizarre. But okay, so what's not working? So what are you working on?
Well, it's pretty much the same thing, that it's just so scary. You know, at the end of every semester when we get the email with all the evals, I just kind of let it sit for a while and then eventually look at it. And yeah, I always need Ralph to say, hey, look, there were some positive things in there too. It's just so difficult to read them.
And it's funny because you're saying like some positive things, but I know your students and they think you're they just love you so much. So I'm sure there's more than some positive things, but I hear you.
But yeah, exactly. Every negative comment, and so I know logically that I should not even worry about changing anything unless there's a theme. Like, that's what I'm really looking for, is do a ton of people say, gosh, we had no idea what she was talking about, or we couldn't read the board, or something like that. Then okay, that's what I'm really looking for. And I'm also looking for those quotes that are good to put in the RTP. But if there's not a theme, it really doesn't matter, you know? I'm intentionally designing my classes to reach a lot of learning styles, and so that naturally is going to mean that some parts are not going to appeal to some people. But that just doesn't really help when you're actually reading the negative comments, you know?
It's so messed up. Like, it's really interesting when you say your approach, because I'm like, the minute the email lands, I have to just read them all. Like, I swear, even if I'm driving, I need to like pull it over. I mean, not that I'm checking my email when I'm driving, but you know, like whatever it is, I have to just read them and just get it over with, because it's so awful.
Oh my gosh.
I have definitely cried before, like when I'm reading them, because some of them are so mean. And it's so weird, because like, I do value student feedback, and it is really important. But why am I weeping? Do you know what I mean? Like, if people, it's so bizarre. It's a terrible, it's just, but I feel like there is such, whatever way the system is, and I think, you know, there has been many studies that show women get harsher evaluations than men.
And different word choices.
And then faculty of colour get a whole other set of like lower numbers and things. And so it's just so weird to me that we factually know that. And we're like, well, what are you going to do? We still need to keep doing the system. And like, just, yeah, it's so bizarre. And it's really interesting because the mid-semester evaluations that we do, they're not submittable for your tenure file.
Oh, really?
And that feels weird to me because, like, there is, I know, and it's like, I think you can say, I did this, so that's yay me, but I don't think you can say the comments.
Huh, I'm surprised.
I could be making that up now. That doesn't,
I mean, I have no idea,
like, but it's just really interesting that, like, this is something that's facilitated by a university professional.
Right.
There's some accountability for the students. Like, they are standing face to face with someone and saying these things. So hopefully they're not saying she should go back to Ireland and she shouldn't be allowed in the United States. Like, hopefully that's not going to come up. But, you know, that kind of, like, it just really feels like all the things that are wrong with the internet are also wrong with student evaluations.
Yeah. Well, maybe that'd be something to advocate for, is the mid-semester evaluations being includable. I don't know of a strong, compelling case why they couldn't be, that maybe we could get past it.
Right, and I think my drum that I will be beating forever is that the comments should not be included.
Yeah.
And that there should be, because there has been people who, on our campus, I think, who've gotten sort of racially abusive.
Yeah, that shouldn't be in your professional file.
No, and I think there should be some potential, like on the student evaluations on the system, it could say anything obnoxious will be totally deleted.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be.
That's a great idea.
Right, and then just some, like, if you wrote something really horrific and, like, threatening or something, it will be followed up. Like, they could trace back who wrote what evaluation, and I don't think I should be able to do that, but somebody somewhere should be able to be like, hey, friend, you said this really scary thing. And, like, I've had someone tell me, like, she had really gross sexual stuff written about her, and, like, we should not have to read that. That's really...
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what could be an option? It seems like it should be easier, not harder, with the electronic evaluations to flag this kind of thing. Like,
totally.
Even if, you know, I understand that it saves a lot of time for nobody to have to read them before us, but at least we could make it so that there's a button or something we can flag the wild ones, and then they can go off. You know, we could flag it as this should be considered for removal, or this should be followed up on, this is not okay. That would be pretty cool.
Because that's like what would happen on a forum or something, right? If someone, and you could just like, And
then it could either be removed or followed up on, depending on how egregious it was.
Right, and I feel like the system where the only thing people can advocate to do is to just not read them. Yeah. It's totally negating the whole thing.
The whole thing is gone if we're not reading them. That doesn't work at all. We might as well not do them.
And students, I mean, the students here, they're really lovely, and people are very polite, and, like, you know...
Yeah, it's the outliers, of course. But the outliers are causing some faculty, evidently, to not read any of them, which...
so
totally. We should definitely... That's not a good system.
Or, you know, grave distress.
Right, and the ones who do read are in grave distress.
Have you gotten any funny ones?
I can't think of any funny ones.
No, it's just the trauma. Like, only the really mean
I remember all the mean ones.
I know. Oh, that first semester teaching, getting them and just being like, but I thought you guys were my friends. And, like, it's just so...
You know, another thing to remember, I mean, obviously there's the really mean ones, and that's just the outlier category. But the other thing that helps me to remember is they're specifically asked what should be improved about this class. You know, some of them nicely write nothing, and that's wonderful, but they're being asked to come up with things to improve.
True.
So, naturally.
So they should change it to just the only questions. What did you love? We don't care. No, that's not true. Yeah. And, like, it is important, but it's just, it's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot. Yeah. I guess when we get those emails, we'll proceed as normal.
Yeah, I'll, like, pull over in my car and, like, weep somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. You'll just let them stew for a few days.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I hear people are always like, why don't we do it together or read them together? Or, like, I'll read yours. And I'm too ashamed for that. Like, the burning shame is just too... I know. Yeah, there's no freaking way. Can you imagine? You'd be like, oh, you've changed so much in my eyes because I've read this. Like,
I know.
Just storm of negative things about you. Like, I feel like I could never look you in the eye again.
But, you know, like we said earlier, our husbands are very good at pointing out that it's not actually that way. We're augmenting the negative ones.
I know, and this is like, it's so clear. Like, if I read yours, I would be like, oh yeah, this one person's just grumpy because, you know, exactly. Whatever. But in my mind, that's not how it works for mine. Which
I feel like brings us back to the quote. One person ought to treat another person properly, even if the person's himself.
I know.
So we'll try to do that.
Very true.
I'll pretend I'm reading yours when I'm actually reading mine.
That's perfect. That's perfect. I like it. Yeah. But it's a tricky business.
That it is. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for talking about it.
Okay, yeah, I have genuine, like, trauma and shame about these student evaluations, so it feels good to air some of this.
Yeah, I'm feeling a little bit better.
And then it's a thing, too, where I'm like, but Claire's great at her job. If she's getting a negative evaluation, then maybe it's not just...
Good point. Yeah, it does happen to everybody. You can't please every single person in the classroom.
No, and I think if you try to, as I have sort of had bizarre attempts at doing, it's just a disaster.
Yeah, you
kind of have to stay right and staying true to what you believe is effective.
Yes.
I mean, without being ridiculous and refusing, you know, if everyone is saying the same thing, you should address it.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah, if you're gonna get some negative reviews, which we all are, then let's get them for doing it the way we want to do it.
Yeah, Claire. Okay.
Which I am totally paraphrasing from Jean-Luc Picard.
Jean-Luc Picard. Yeah. What a great... Yeah, I think anyone who's a mentor can be a professor.
Okay. I am glad that we've had that clarification.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's true. But I might be quoting you in future episodes. What you just said is really amazing. So, yeah.
Oh, man.
Okay, thanks, Claire.
Thanks so much, Ruth. And thanks, Ralph, as always.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. We're delighted to have you as a listener, and we would love to hear from you. And if you want to email us, our address is contactprofessorpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any of your suggestions for future shows or professor quotes that you might want to share with us, or even just things that have come up for you when you were listening to previous episodes. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, we would love if you would spread the word. So the best way to spread word is by telling people you know if you think they should listen to it, or you can leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.